All right, we are out here with Rennie, and he just got here about an hour ago, and he's already doing really great. He is acclimating wonderfully. He's a superbly social dog who seems to be able to read other dogs' body languages pretty well. He's like a happy-go-lucky guy, and he's also obviously an adolescent. So that can be hard sometimes if you have like an adult dog that wants space from especially a rambunctious young puppy, but he actually so far is doing really well navigating that as well. And of course, we're here to help him along with that and help him to continue to learn how to speak dog very well. So the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to just grab a little leash. Here we go. And I just have a slip leash. That's kind of what we use here at the studio. Perfect. All right. So we're going to talk about I have a feeling, he gives me the vibe of a pretty smart dog. So I have a feeling he's come pre-wired, knowing some behaviors already. If I had to guess, he might already know like sitting down, as well as maybe some other things as well. So I wanted to kind of just crack into seeing what he knows and starting to talk about some of the more intricate parts of how we train, which makes it a little bit different than what he's learned previously, which will help make your obedience more clear and consistent, and usually quicker as well. We'll talk about how to get like quick, clear, consistent obedience. That's usually our goal. So got some treats here. First thing I'm going to do is see how he likes food, and surprise, surprise, he seems to like it. I've got some of his Nutro Crunch mixed in with some freeze-dried food here. Hopefully he doesn't have like a sensitive tummy. Let me know if you guys just prefer for me to stick to his treats, but I just have like a little mixture going here. Good. So what I'm doing here is something called a food lure. Essentially, it should look like a magnet to your dog's nose. So I have a handful of treats, or you could use his kibble, bring it right to his nose, and I should be able to guide him several steps in any direction. Good. And so generally the food lure will be like a duck bill, or if your dog's really grabby, he seems very gentle. You could kind of have more of like a holding the treat with your thumb, and your open cup should be kind of facing his nose. And then when you want to switch direction, you would flip your hand so it does something like that. Good. And so we use a food lure generally to acquire most of the behaviors or obedience commands in the program. So we use it to shape sit, down, heel, place, etc. The only behavior we won't use food luring to shape generally is the act of settling, which we'll talk about a little bit. Oop, that stuck to my hand. A little bit later. So for food luring in week 1, we want to make sure we can guide our dogs into all 3 of our basic commands, which would be sit, down, and place. Hey, Ren. Good boy. I just want to see what he knows here. There's that sit. Very nice. I'm going to use a food lure to see if we are familiar. Yeah, with that down position. Very good. Okay. And then for heel, if he doesn't know it already, we're going to guide him behind us with a lunge. Flip our little food lure back and guide him to the seam of our pants. I'm going to guide him into a sitting position, feed him here, and then release him. We're going to talk about releasing our dogs from behavior in just a second. So from the side, I'm going to take a lunge. I've got that food lure to his nose. Bring him backwards, flip my food lure, guide him to my side. Whoops. If he kind of passes, there we go. I can back him up a little bit. Guide him into a sit. Good. I'm going to feed him there. Okay. And I'm going to release him out. Nice job. There we go. Good. Nice. Very nice. Okay. Very good. So he looks familiar with all 3 of the basic positions. I would just use a little bit for your homework, if you wanted to get started for week 1, you could start food luring and making sure that he's super confident in those positions, because the next step to that is adding in that verbal cue. I have a feeling you probably have done this with sit and down at least. Down. There's a fly. I think it's distracting him. His lips stuck in his teeth. He's like, oh. Yeah, there he is. Perfect. Giving dogs time to hear that command. Yeah, and he kind of pops up out of that down kind of quickly. I don't know if that happens at home generally. or if he's just excited. Obviously, I only know what I see so far. Good boy. Maybe he can hold down. Yeah, perfect. So we're going to build some clarity into that for him, because generally with how we teach commands, especially like with down or anything that we want our dog to maintain or hold during for a certain amount of time or while things are happening, the dog kind of has to read the play. So traditionally we ask the dog to down. And unless we're doing something like stay while we do this, or walk this far away, or wait this amount of time, the dog has to kind of say, you've stopped feeding me and you're walking away. Maybe I'm done. Or you're giving me a lot of eye contact right now, so maybe I should stay here. So they have to kind of guess and read a lot of like different things to understand like if they should be maintaining that behavior or not. So what we do in this program that helps really simplify that for both you and the dog is we have what's called an implied stay system. So do you know that word? So the implied stay system basically builds stay into all behaviors that we're working on. So that's going to require us to have what we call a marker system that we're going to kind of come up with. I'm going to use a general set of markers for him while he's here at day camp. But if you wanted to change any of those markers for when you're working with Ren at home, maybe you want a French word instead of an English word or anything kind of like that, you're totally able to do that. Dogs can kind of be bilingual, and I might have a set of cues for him. But as long as you're consistent about how you use those cues with him when you train with him, it'll be smooth. So the first marker we're gonna talk about is the good reward marker. This is the word or sound that we're gonna use to indicate, I like what you're doing. Please keep doing what you're doing. We can pair that word with food, and we generally will, especially in the beginning, but sometimes we don't. But it should tell the dog to keep going. And it kind of replaces that stay in the beginning phases. It's really the same thing as saying stay. So basically we're using some word like good or good boy to indicate we like what you're doing, please keep doing what you're doing, but it does not release the dog from the behavior. And that comes into play later on because we want to, as we're going through the learning phases of each of these basic positions, we want the dog to experience a time where we use the good reward marker. I know I'm yapping a lot. Here you go, buddy. We're using the good reward marker, but we don't feed, but then the dog learns to actually still maintain the behavior, even though I'm not feeding you. So even though I stopped giving you food, his tongue's hanging out and that fly's coming back. We're gonna keep saying, you're doing a good job. So that good reward marker, like I said, usually we're using something like good or good boy. The next marker we're gonna talk about is the release word. So that is a word or sound that we're using that indicates you're all done. So generally we're using something like, okay. You can use break, release, all done, things like that. So this tells the dog that they are all done with the behavior. They can get up, they can move around, they can go back to doing what they were doing before, whatever. So with the release word, we can pair that with food or not, and that's going to come into play later on. So when we're building stable behavior, especially if we want him to learn to hold this nice, beautiful, settled down, or when we start to introduce place and we want to start to introduce some heavy distractions, we want the dog to find being in that behavior way more rewarding than leaving the behavior. So if I have my dog holding place, I might want to reinforce my dog for being really settled and calm on the place bed while I'm juggling flaming bowling pins and doing cartwheels and all kinds of stuff over here and practicing having dogs go by and all that other stuff. And so I want to build value in doing that calm, settled behavior. And when I release him out of that behavior, I can use my release word, okay, and then not feed him after. And so that actually ends the behavior, and it's kind of a reward in and of itself because you're done doing that thing and now you're kind of at liberty. But I don't pair it with food sometimes because I want that behavior to be more reinforcing. So if that sounds like a whole lot of things to learn and remember, don't sweat it. This is week 1. We're doing really easy stuff, but I just kind of wanted to explain some stuff, especially in a video format versus obviously we'll go over it together in group class, but sometimes group class can be a little bit nutty. And if you're like me, when I'm doing something new and I'm in a new environment, I don't necessarily have like my thinking cap fully secured. I'm kind of worried about what's going on and I'm not necessarily retaining information. And the other thing I want to mention is that all this information is also on the online learning portal lesson links, which I'll be sending out shortly. So we have our good reward marker, we have our release word, and then we have actually another way we can release our dog from behavior, and that's going to be with using a clicker. I'm going to put a pin in the clicker for just a second so that I can talk about the last marker. But just know that if we use the clicker, it will release your dog from behavior if they're under command. So if I asked him to sit and I clicked, I would expect him to run to me to get food. We'll talk about that. But it will release him from behavior. So the clicker is an example of what we call a terminal marker. It releases our dog from behavior always to food. That's all you have to remember right now. The final marker we're going to talk about is the no reward marker. This is the word or sound that we're going to use to indicate, whoops, you made a mistake. Go back to doing what you were doing before. It should be non-punitive. So whatever word you use for jumping up on grandma or sniffing the counter or doing something really naughty, it's not going to be that word. So for me, I'll generally use something like oops. You can use no, but it has kind of like a very neutral inflection. So I'll give you an example of how we use that. And generally with the no reward marker, and we're going to start to implement this implied stay system with him right now. So I'm going to ask him to do sit or down. It's going to be super easy. And while I'm chatting, I'm just kind of letting him chase some treats. I'm going to use my good reward marker when he's correct. I'd like to try to use it with and without food, so he gets used to that. I'm going to do something to possibly have him think about breaking that position before I've released him. Maybe I back up or turn around, or time goes by and he's like, am I done? And he tries to get up. And then I'm going to use my no reward marker. So with the assumption that he's never heard that before, a no reward marker, I'm going to teach it to him. And the way that we teach a dog what a mistake marker means, a no reward marker means, is to pair it with pressure. In the acquisition phase, the very first phase of learning, generally we are pairing the no reward marker with food as the pressure. So we talked about food luring to capture the behavior or acquire the behavior. And when we do that, good, we're giving him the food afterwards. So we get him into that position and then we feed him. That's a food lure. When we're using food as a pressure with the no reward marker, I probably will not feed him that food. So what that looks like, we're going to say sit. I'm going to say good. I'm going to give him a piece of food. And I want to try to use that good reward marker without food. And then I'm going to kind of do something to potentially make him break. Oh, what a good boy. I might go in and feed him for that. He's handling that. Obviously, you guys have worked on some stuff with him. Oh, very good. I might have to do something really challenging. There we go. So I'm going to say, And now I'm using food as a pressure. So I use that food the same way I use the food lure, in that I used it to get him back into that position. Oops. Same thing right here. I'm going to use it as a pressure, plus a little spatial pressure here to get him back into a sit. Good. But I didn't feed him. Now I'm going to feed him because he's committed to the behavior. But it's a very nuanced thing. So right here, I'm going to say, Good. 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 Now I'm going to feed him. Okay. Good. Perfect. And so I threw out that release word there, and I added in some kissy sounds because, again, I'm going to assume he's never heard a release word before, so I need to teach him what that means. So after I say the release word, I'm just gonna use some backwards body movement, some clapping, some kissing to help get him out of that position. So we're gonna go through that one more time. Oh, there's my clicker. Wrong pocket. Sit. Good. 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 Perfect. And he's doing great with that. I'm gonna try releasing him. Here we go. So I'm gonna say, I'm gonna try to get him back to where he was. I'm gonna use that food as a pressure, but not feed him. Good. Good. I'm gonna wait for him to be kind of committed to that behavior. Good. Now I'm gonna use that release word. Okay. Nice. Good. And usually I generally don't feed after I use my release word, but you totally can. And that's it. So that was probably a lot. And we're going to talk about the clicker probably tomorrow while he's here, because that can be a little bit of a long video as well. And I don't want to overwhelm you guys with more than a 15-minute video for his first day. So we're going to continue to work on this stuff with him. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of something to mull over before camp. But he's doing great. Good job, bud.